Most people won't admit this on YouTube or social media, but I quit. I stepped off the course mid-race, could have continued, and it was a race that I'd spent 7 years obsessing over, and that decision still haunts me today. But here's the twist. That single failure, it became the spark that led me to winning multiple ultramarathons, setting course records, and chasing down a world championship. This is as brutally honest a version of that story as I can possibly give you. No hype, just the truth behind what it really takes to bounce back after you break. And it's relevant to all of us that run. From the very start, I was absolutely all in, and this is the reason for the brand. I was all in on running, and very quickly, my goals with running were super ambitious. And they were to run a 2-hour 20 marathon. At this point, I hadn't even ran a marathon. To run a 2 hours 20 marathon, to win the British Championships 100K, to win Il Passatore, to win the World Championships 100K, and to set the world record in 100K. But there was another goal, a sixth goal, that was way beyond all of those and was the cherry on top. And that was to win Subida al Pico Valletta in Spain, a 50K uphill from Granada to the top of Valletta Mountain. And that was absolutely everything to me. It was my Olympic gold medal. And if I can give you one piece of advice from this video, it's define what is your Olympic gold medal. That was everything to me and way more important. And you've probably, unless you watch this channel a lot, you've probably never even heard of that race. The reason it meant so much to me was because it became like my North Star. I started running, I was terrible. I got into 5Ks and 10Ks, started to patch some training together, and then got invited to an ultramarathon that I didn't even know existed before I got invited to that race. And it's as hard as it possibly can be. 50K uphill, average 5.5%, 6%, finishing at 3,350 meters on top of Mount Valletta. It's through the heat, it's through the cold, the snow at the top. Cannot be more brutal with the altitude and everything else. And I just knew that if I can get good at that race, if I can improve in that race, all my running is going to improve. And so from that first attempt in 2010, each year, more or less each year, I gradually improved. I took a back step 1 year, but still kept the same place. But I moved forward in both the time that I was doing and also the place that I was coming, to a point where in 2016, I was the favorite for the race. And by this point, I knew the course better than the locals. I knew the course better than anybody that had run it because, and this proves how all in I was, within a year and a half, 2 years, I'd relocated my life to the foot of the mountain so I could train on the mountain as much as possible. That's how obsessed I became with this race, and it moved my running forward massively. But after training like an animal for 6 months to prepare for this race, and doing everything that I needed to do in the weight room, cross-training, specifically on the mountain, specifically at altitude, at 43K, I just watched everything slip away from me. The course record slip away from me, the win slip away from me, the podium slip away from me, and there were problems, there's excuses, but without being injured, I stopped and I gave up. Mentally, I just cracked. And it was because I trained so hard that I was adamant, I was arrogant, that nobody could beat me. And to watch everything just running away from you towards the finish line, all your dreams going, when that was the year, was just too much for me to handle in that moment. I could have just walked to the finish, and I would have been at the finish 2 hours later, and I would have been more proud of myself for doing that than the way I handled it. But that moment rewired something in my brain in terms of all the fire in the belly, but to go back and check absolutely everything I've been doing and improve every aspect of my game. And the race starts at 7 o'clock in the morning. So hopefully by 11, you're done if you're going to win the race, or just before. So I was down the mountain, siesta and training that afternoon, being out there on the bike. That's from that moment, I was back in training for the next year to make that right, to correct that mistake. And one thing that's really important to do when you have something like that, maybe you went for a sub 3 hour marathon, you didn't make it, you failed, it was a catastrophe, you've got to get back on the horse as soon as you possibly can with smaller races. And all of those smaller races that I started to do, half marathons, other races to train to, were all essentially stepping stones and training races on track to doing that race the next year, 2017, and making good that. And along the way, I had London Marathon, where I hit that 2:21 goal. And then I had the British Championships, 100K, just 4 weeks later, where I hit the goal of becoming British Championship. I won the race. But none of that was anything compared to getting back to Granada and running the Valletta race and being so in the zone that I didn't want to speak to somebody before the race. I'm never like that. But I was just so business focused that from start to finish, it was so calculated that nobody could have beaten me on that day. And I made it that way. And I was so confident because I'd put in the training. The training had been extremely methodical. I couldn't lose. Mentally, I was so strong I couldn't have lost. And I won and I set the course record. That wouldn't have happened if I would have just succeeded, or it wouldn't have meant as much. That meant a lot to me because of exactly what had happened the previous years and the 8-year build-up to that year becoming the champion of the race and the course record holder. Weirdly, and I'll come on to this in a second, when you have a big goal, and for you it might be sub 2:30 or 3 hours or sub 3:30, whatever it is, it's a huge milestone. For me, when I hit that, it didn't feel like I imagined it would, and I'll come on to that in a second. And so in the space between the end of April, London Marathon, and the start of August, I'd done 3 of the things that I set out to do. I'd ran the 2:21 marathon, which for me it was close enough. And then I'd won the British Championship 100K, set out 4 minute per kilometre pace, 6:26 per mile, held it from start to finish, and ran 6:42 for the 100K. But most importantly to me, I'd won and set the course record at the race that I'd obsessed about for 8 years. And the enthusiasm and passion for the sport was bigger than ever. And the next big thing was Il Passatore, 100-kilometre race from Firenze, Florence in Italy, across the mountains to Faenza. Beautiful, spectacular race, and something that I'd always wanted to do, always wanted to win, and follow in the footsteps of Don Ritchie, who had won it twice, 40 years before, and who I'd read books about and just loved the guy. And when I got to the start line for that, I knew I wasn't as fit as I'd ever been. I knew I didn't have the big base of fitness behind me. I had some specificity for the race, but I was gonna go for it anyway, because why not? I'm just gonna go for it. And if that means I don't make it, fine, completely fine by that. And what that does for you, if you run, say you run sub 3 hours for the marathon, and that is your dream goal in the future, when you hit that, it frees you up completely to do what you're really capable of. So a lot of the time we want to check that box so that we can do things and remove that safety net and really go for it. And this was one of those times. So I got on the start line, and something that was in my favor massively was it was ridiculously hot that day, even hotter than usual. It's the end of May in Italy, in mid-Italy or middle Italy, so you kind of feel it's going to be hot anyway, but this was super hot, 32, 35 degrees on the start line. And I can hand on heart say that it was the worst performance, the worst race execution. Strategy was there, but just so poorly executed. Found myself in the lead after 22, 24K. And I knew that this would be an issue, but I'd signed with the wrong shoe company the previous year. And I'd signed on the promise that we were going to build the fastest marathon shoe in the world, fastest road marathon shoe in the world. They weren't able to do it. And it was naive of me, and I take full responsibility for that. And in my head, which is where you do the majority of your thinking, for me, it was almost like the Prefontaine, Bowerman years, trialing different shoes, trialing different materials, and then building something that was going to be market leading. But it never happened. And so I ran that race with trail shoes on that were heavy, and I've never stopped and stretched in a race, but I had to stop 5 or 6 times, like from 40K onwards, stop and stretch my calves. And I thought at any moment my Achilles are gonna rupture. My calves were just solid blocks of wood. And it just became a game for me to continue on suffering for as long as I possibly could. It wasn't pain, it was just dull ache from very early on, up the hill at 40K to 50K, down the hill from 50K to 60K, and then almost another marathon into Faenza. I just suffered for probably 70K and won the race. And just by sheer determination, I crossed the finish line and I kind of shake my head because I just can't believe that I've managed to fend off everybody that was chasing me. And I wasn't meant to go into the lead so early on in the race. But what I did is just when you reach this big milestone in your life, and as I said, this could be sub 20 minutes for your 5K, it could be sub 40 minutes for your 10K or sub 3 hour marathon. What you realize, and I'm sat in this hotel room just thinking to myself that this is not all what it's cracked up to be. And it's actually not about accomplishing the big feat. It's way more about very quickly, within a couple of days of reflection, you realize that it's about the hard grind for years or many months and years for you to put something together, to put yourself in a place to execute like that. That's what it is all about. It's definitely about the journey and nothing to do with the reward. To the point where I don't care about the reward. But what it had done was, I was like you are after a marathon, I was sore for a couple of weeks afterwards, but that soreness just continued to a point where there was no physical therapy or physiotherapy that was having any effect at all. And I was just constantly having tendinosis, constant problems. And in the middle of all this, there's huge life change because the UK leaves the EU. And I don't want to get into it too much, but all of a sudden I think, okay, I get to the Middle East, I get to the UAE, spend time there and figure out my next move, which is possibly the worst place in the world for a runner to live. So if you speak to runners there and they think it's a good place, they're lying to you, and they're lying to themselves as well. If you want to set yourself up for success, you'd be somewhere like I am right now in the north of Thailand, or you'd be in the south of Spain. And funny enough, because everything goes full circle, I realized that when I'd relocated to Spain, this is 13 years ago now, then that was setting me up for success. That was being in the environment that was conducive of high performance and is absolutely everything when you go out and you're running on the most beautiful trails in the world. And that's how I feel here also in terms of cycling and running in Chiang Mai. So whatever failures you've had, like if you've had an awful race, it's just one bad day. And it's not indicative of the training program or the years of training that you've had. It's just, if you work it the right way, it's a turning point. It's an opportunity to go back to the drawing board, figure out what went wrong, what you can do differently, and how you can improve and really smarten yourself up. And I get asked a lot about, oh, but I'm 45 now, or I'm 55 now, I'm 65 now, can I run my best times? Obviously, it depends on your background. If you've been an elite athlete since you were 14 to 55 and you've absolutely milked every ounce out of yourself, then the chances are you're not going to run your fastest ever times. But for many runners, they're still capable of running their fastest times if they're willing to change slightly and run in a more methodical, smarter way. And it always makes me laugh, and I mention it a lot on this channel, but if somebody's 10 or 15% away from running that magical sub 3 that means so much to them, if it does mean enough to you, you're going to make it happen, because 10 to 15% is absolutely nothing if you've not been training optimally, which the vast majority of us never have and maybe never will. Whatever failure you've had, whether it's a bad race, an injury, burnout, life stuff, life getting in the way, it's not the end. It's just your opportunity to take a new path. You're not too old, you're not too slow, you're not past it. The only question is, are you willing to rebuild smarter? And that's what I do now. I help runners like you build real structure, find consistency, and hit goals that you think are out of reach, but they're not. It's all to do with the right mindset, the right system, And you need to stop quitting on yourself. Cannot stress it enough that it's all to do with mindset and having the right system in place so that you can have your work ethic, your discipline, and a positive attitude working for you in every run, every session that you do. Well, you can't be up there. Okay, so this is Gizmo, and she's messy right now because she's just been climbing a tree, and she's about 1% of the size of my cat, but she's become the bully of him, and we're gonna look after her.